Just a quick note from our producers. The P4B and the Free Zone Communiqué use no CGI, no trick photography. I really am this good looking.
This is the Free Zone Communiqué, transmitting from Virginia's unoccupied sector. If you think smart cities, DEI, censorship, government intrusion, bug paste, and other left-wing nonsense are no longer a possibility, think again. We've won one election with slim majorities. Our work to rebuild a free and sane America has just begun.
This is the Free Zone Communiqué. I'm your host, Matt Jordan, bringing hope to the victims trapped behind the wire in blue cities. We have a huge show today. Tilak Doshi, Dr. Tilak Doshi. He is a former contributor to Forbes magazine. He's a contributor to Skeptic magazine. I will read his credits when I bring him on. This guy's been around the world, and he's a professor of economics, but his field of study lately has been the environment, the green movement, alternative energy, things like that. So yes, it will be a lively discussion. Stick around. At the bottom of the page, I'll leave links where you can find all our stuff. Wherever you get to P4B in the Free Zone, please follow, subscribe, leave reviews and comments, and share. This is how we grow. I'll leave a link to where you can support the P4B directly so you too can be a political party pooper. But the most pleasure you can get by supporting us is to shout Po River. I'll leave samples and links for that as well. Thanks to all our supporters and subscribers. Joining me now is Tilak Doshi. He's a Forbes contributor and independent consultant. He received his PhD in economics in 1992 from the University of Hawaii's East-West Center. He's an MA and BA in economics and history from Victoria University, Wellington, New Zealand. My man is well-traveled. Tilak's area of expertise is oil and gas sector. He's worked in a number of organizations. Tilak, if you can give me this this abbreviation, ICEAS, ISEAS.
Institute of Southeast Asian Studies.
Okay. He was there as a fellow and head of energy project at Arthur D. Little as the principal consultant for energy practice. At Saudi Aramco, he worked as a specialist, business analysis, and corporate planning for crude oil sales and marketing department. Previously, chief economist and principal fellow at the Energy Study Institute, and program director for senior research fellow at King Abdullah. Petroleum Studies and Research Center, CAPSARC in Riyadh. He was managing consultant at Muse, Stansel and Company, Asia, based in Singapore from 2016 to 2019. I haven't read a list like that since I think Patricia DeGennaro was on here. She's like the professor of everything. But welcome to the show, Dr. Tilak Doshi.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Can I call you Tilak?
Yes,
Thank
please
you.
do so.
Okay. Well, I noticed in your credits, you are a contributor to The Skeptic.
Yes, the Daily Skeptic, which is a UK publication. It's a online a contrarian kind of news in a range of areas, including COVID, climate, the culture wars, So it's a growing publication, and I'm the energy editor. I was appointed quite recently with them, so I'm glad to be with them.
Yeah. How did you get involved with the Skeptic? Because there is I believe, a U.S. version of the
Uh,
publication.
I I have to check on that now that you bring it up. I'm not sure. We are a small outfit. It's headed by Lord Toby Young, who started a skeptical broadsheet kind of internet site during the COVID days, arguing against the kind of policies that were pursued around the world with regard to lockdowns and forced vaccinations. So it grew up as an anti-COVID lockdown kind of site. And following that, as COVID went away from being a crisis, they got into a number of areas, including issues related to climate change, because the UK, like the rest of Europe, is extremely committed towards green policies to its detriment and to the adverse effects of imposing adverse effects on its people. So that's how the magazine grew. And I joined them as a result of me being deplatformed by Forbes after 4 years of contributing with them. I'm not sure whether you want to get into that now or
Sure.
later on.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So to kind of to cut the long story short, I was contributing articles with them for 4 years up to about the middle of last year, or towards the end of last year, when the Trump election campaign was taking off towards the elections in the U.S., the presidential elections in the U.S., and I wrote an article in favor of J.D. Vance as Mr. Trump's choice for VP.
Right.
And essentially, I said that he had a bunch of critics who accused him of being a climate denier. As you know, that is a favorite go-to term of endearment, sarcastically, a term of abuse, actually,
Yeah. Yeah.
for everyone that they disagree with. So he was called a climate denier by a range of media outlets. And I argued against that, saying that he knew um, much more about energy and energy economics than his critics gave him credit for. And as a result of that article, first the article was taken down, then I was informed that I was no longer a contributor to Forbes. So I took that story and sent it to the Daily Skeptic, because I now live in London and I keep up to date with news, partially with the Daily Skeptic. So I thought they would have appreciated it, and sure enough, they did. So they reproduced that article that was deleted by Forbes.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
Yeah, and to top it off, I wrote a repost to the Forbes decision, questioning their motivation in canceling me. So the Daily Skeptic published both those articles back to back in one piece. Following that, I wrote several pieces for them, and then I joined them as a staff member.
I wonder how they'll feel about a brash American. Maybe I should submit to them. That's all my work.
They're welcoming to everyone. No fear or favor. We like to have an open debate, so you're definitely welcome to.
Well, I have two takeaways from what you just told me. One, if I could make a blanket statement about people and movements and publications in general, they demonstrate their lack of reason, their lack of ability to reason. When you say something that doesn't fit their worldview, you just get fired, or you get doxxed, or you get canceled. And that demonstrates to me that, well, it tells me I believe I'm on the right path, because I force myself to think. I look at opposing views. I'm even swayed sometimes by opposing views, and I can be stubborn. But if the evidence is there, if a new set of facts are provided, I can be persuaded. And if somebody has an opinion, like in your case, you had a strong opinion, and I think an educated opinion, that J.D. Vance is not a dummy. He knows of which he speaks. He's got the receipts. And you rendered that opinion to what was supposed to be a valid organization, Forbes, for God's sakes, and you get canned. That's pretty
Absolutely.
pathetic.
That is.
Yeah. The other thing is that term climate denier. The construct, to me, the construct of that term is hateful. It's based on a term that stood alone for a long time. That would be a Holocaust denier, because there's people running around saying, oh, no, Hitler didn't kill a bunch of Jewish people or gypsies or crippled people. Oh, that's crazy. And we called those people Holocaust deniers. And it does evoke a visceral reaction to hear the term. So these yahoos, these emotionalists that dominate climate alarmism, hijacked the term. And they created this nonsense term of climate denier. When I hear stuff like that, it just first I lose respect for the opposing point of view when I hear that kind of nonsense. But the problem, I find it's very difficult to find someone who will speak unemotionally about the issue. Listen,
Yes.
I hope you'll excuse the term, because I always use it. I always refer to the man as that knob Al Gore. It said last year at Davos, not this year's, but the 2024 Davos, that we release into the atmosphere the equivalent of 600,000 Hiroshima bombs every day. That's the stupidest thing a human being's ever said. And he destroys his own argument. But the cult followers eat that up.
Absolutely. That term climate denier is, as you said, it reveals the ideological basis of people using that term, firstly. And also, if you notice, almost every time people like us get attacked for talking about climate change and other related issues, the attack is always an ad hominem attack. They attack
Correct.
you as a messenger and your personal characteristics, rather than debate step by step the substantive arguments that you put forward. That's always the case.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. I mean, you have people range from Gore to, what's her name? Greta Thunberg, other apparatic chicks of Davos WEF. It's rare to come across somebody who just talks numbers, and then the numbers often are questionable.
Yes.
I have been warning for the longest time about the hockey stick and man and their secretive attitudes about their research. Speaking of which, one of your articles, two of your articles, talked about
Mark Stein.
Mark Stein. That's the guy.
Yes. Yes.
He had a pretty good couple of weeks in court.
Absolutely. Yes, yes, and he got even the last piece of good news. I'm sure you're aware of it. Is that the judge refused Mann, Michael Mann, the creator of that fraudulent hockey stick. They refused him for a delay in the repayment that he owes to the National Review, I believe. He sued two companies and two people. The companies were absolved from the court case early on because they couldn't be sued. So he owed one of them, I think it's the National Review. He owes one of them about $530,000.
Mhm.
And that he asked for a delay for that payment, a stay on that payment. They refused it.
I would
Uh,
hope so. I mean, he's been getting money poured on his head by governments and cronies all over the world,
Absolutely, yes.
all as a result, all as the result of a graph where he said, I thought it was important that my evidence create shock value, upset people and shock them into action.
Yes.
But the evidence thereby becomes invalid just by that statement. Even let's assume his numbers were perfect. I already have my theories on that, but let's assume they're perfect. As soon as you say I wanted to produce numbers that shocked people into action, your work is invalidated as a
Yes.
scientist. It may be true, it may not be true, but as a scientist, you have invalidated your own work, which is crazy.
Absolutely. Yes, yes, yes.
Um,
And the wonder of it is how entire organizations like the United Nations, IPCC, adopted it as their front and center
right.
as a way of pushing their climate change, travesty down down people's throats all around the world. It's shocking.
Yeah, and they got caught basically involved in the same type of practice. They would go to their IPCC scientists. Now, some of those guys are valid, legitimate, disinterested scientists. Excuse me. And they said, give us this statement. And that they would come out with a statement based on such and such a question from the UN. And it wouldn't be shocking. It wouldn't be scary. They would go back to them and say, rewrite it. We need more urgency. We need more CO2 in the atmosphere, more people dying. And over the course of the life of that commission, I do believe about half of the scientists have quit for that reason, because their work was being insulted.
Yes, I believe Steve Koonin wrote extensively on it in his book, which I reviewed a couple of years ago. His excellent book, I would recommend that to anyone, called Unsettled. His whole point being that the science is not settled in climate change. Steve Koonin, he was the chief science advisor to the Obama administration. So very, very established, very credentialed author and scientist. And he spoke about how, particularly in that document, Summary for Policymakers, which is extracted from thousands of scientists doing thousands of detailed investigations and scientific research on various aspects of the climate area, how that would be railroaded by bureaucrats and politicians into the Summary for Policymakers, which was the only document, the much, much shorter document, which is the only document that the mainstream media attended to, and based all their very, very shocking and scary predictions of the future, based on that political document, not a scientific document. So I believe Steve Koonin does a very good job in explaining that entire process.
Yeah, the media has made it quite easy for this. Uh, there is a lack of professional skepticism in modern media. They go with the easiest thing they can find, or it's spoon fed to them. Uh, they'll in any subject, not just climate, but the White House will come out with a talking point. In the case of what I'm saying, it would be the Biden White House, for example, or Obama. Here's our talking point. And you could sit and watch all day long because it's only a half-hour news cycle and it's on 24 hours a day. They all parrot the actual line. They either paraphrase or quote the line as news. That's not news. That's
Yeah,
stenography. That's
absolutely. Yeah,
parroting.
on that point, the scary thing is that was it Hitler's chief propagandist Goebbels who said that if you make a lie blatant enough and repeat it often enough, it gets accepted as truth. And we see it around us. Children, high school kids, they all repeat those same talking points. And was it one of the great authors of American fiction? His name escapes me, but the one who wrote Tom Sawyer. Uh,
The one
the
who,
one who wrote Tom Sawyer.
oh yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Oh my
the
God.
both of us are our gray
Mark
cells.
Twain. Mark Twain.
Mark Twain, yeah. Mark Twain, if I'm not mistaken, said that it's easier to fool people than to convince them that they've been fooled.
That's true.
And that is so true. It's so hard to convince people with facts, all the facts you can have in the fingertips, but if they're convinced of the storyline, they're gonna remain convinced.
In that regard, um, that's when politics and social issues become like religion. Um, the more fantastic, the more outlandish the claim, the more the willing acolytes flock to it. The crazier the statement, the more readily accepted it is. Like Al Gore's 600,000 Hiroshima bombs. I've heard it quoted a few times since then. Why would you
Yes,
quote something like that? Do you have no dignity?
yes, it's crazy. Yeah. Um, there must be some psychological aspects to this. And I believe, I forget the author's name, but he's made a massive impact on understanding the COVID kind of hysteria that overtook us a few years ago with the term called mass formation. Desmet, his name is Desmet. Forget his first name, Desmet, a European, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know which part of Europe he's from, but he made quite a plausible argument about how mass psychosis can take place when people feel threatened or people feel scared. So, the role about fear porn, as they call it,
Yeah.
when it leads, it leads. And I feel the same kind of parameters and dynamics apply over the climate issue.
Yeah. And it starts early. They've got kids as young as 8 terrified that the world's going to turn into a cinder and disappear. We'll all be dead.
Yes, it's
Um,
so
and if
sad.
you get them that early, if you get their fear mentality cranked up that early, you can convince them of anything.
Yes,
We
yeah.
have adults running around right now saying boys can be girls. Boys can poof magically turn into girls.
Yeah,
It
yeah. What a
it's
tragedy.
nonsense on its face. Any person who took a step back objectively and looked at that uh, just that concept, you have to come away laughing. That's the most ridiculous thing I ever heard. But it's an outrageous statement. And the rubes love the outrageous statement. They dive on it.
Yes, it's sort of sometimes you wonder whether you're living in some kind of alternate universe. It's like that Matrix movie, whether you're red pilled or blue pilled, and if you're blue pilled, there's no hope for you, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, it's a wonder.
It's crazy. But in your studies, I want to ask your opinion of the alternative energies that we see being employed. I've written several articles on wind and solar, especially wind. And I won't tell you my views. I genuinely want to hear what you see in the future and what value you place in these alternative forms of energy.
Right. Starting with the second part first, in terms of their viability as energy sources, I think they're extremely unviable. They're intermittent. They produce only dilute power, amounts of energy. They occupy massive amounts of land. They absorb or they use massive amounts of material. So while the Industrial Revolution and progress and science and technology have all led us to an economic development process where less and less material is used as a means of bringing out greater efficiencies, here we are seeing a reversal, a regression, rather than a progression in terms of scientific advances and technological advances. It's almost as if the ideology of renewable energy has taken over the physics of energy.
Right.
And so we get to this ridiculous situation where Germany is cutting down ancient Teutonic forest in order to build windmills to save the environment. And so for a number of reasons, I mean, there are very good studies out there that show that solar and wind are far more expensive forms of energy and far less reliable and far less efficient once you take system cost into account. If you just take a snapshot in time when the wind is blowing or when the sun is shining without clouds, fine.
I was just about to go there. Yeah, go ahead.
Once you take the entire system cost into account, the transmission lines, the mining of all the minerals and resources and rare earths that you need to have for components for solar and wind, once you take all those costs into account, and in particular intermittency, because you got to have a backup system waiting to take over and to keep the lights on when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. So you're creating two systems. One, the backup system, and two, this crony capitalist solar and wind energy, right, which is inherently parasitical. So you end up subsidizing both. Now governments are subsidizing not only renewable energy, but they're subsidizing the backup energy, because right, the backup guys, the coal guys and the natural gas guys are saying, look, we can't just sit here and wait, keep our turbines running, waiting to come in when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. You're going to pay us for that. Otherwise, we're going to lose money. We're going to be out of business. So the governments end up subsidizing both because of this parasite renewable energy that they are ideologically committed to. So that's a point. In answer to your second about the outlook, I think the outlook is very poor. I think you can only pull the wool over people's eyes for so long. and for so much. Communities around the West, in rural areas in Europe as well as in the US, they are objecting to windmills spoiling their countryside, and taking up land in their area. Coastal communities are objecting to offshore wind programs. In the US, as you are well aware of, many large projects have been canceled. Renewable energy companies are all either in very dire straits or out of business, including some of the largest ones.
Yeah.
They keep cash and they require the taxpayers' money to keep running. The latest we've heard and seen is BP. Over the past few weeks, they have made a 180-degree U-turn. They were the most woke large oil company, if you might remember, for the last 20 years.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was
they've been-
mea culpa for the Gulf accident. They decided to go all PR green. Yeah, you were talking. You mentioned three things just in that one segment. One is the term crony capitalist, which I use a lot, and I have accused the entire green industry of being just that. Almost every single dime they get prior to actually selling the electricity they produce comes from the government. This is not a government community partnership. This is pure crony graft. You go all the way back to Obama's Solyndra adventure, where they dumped billions on this company. And before it produced one electron, it went out of business. And all the executive parachuted out with millions and millions of dollars.
Sorry, I missed you there. Which company was that?
Solyndra.
Yes, Solyndra. I've written
Obama
about that. Yeah.
sold Solyndra down our throats, and it was garbage.
Yes.
Wind is inherently, the more pinwheels, the more turbines you put in one farm, the more inefficient each one becomes. People don't realize, they think wind, if it blows through a propeller, it makes the propeller move and then it just continues on. That's not how it works. That propeller saps some of that wind energy. The air starts to tumble as it goes past the propellers. And eventually it might start moving again. But the next wind turbine, if you look at these farms, there's line after line, a line of these things. The next one turns less efficiently. The one after that, less efficiently. You can go 10 miles beyond a large wind farm and detect a decrease in surface winds.
Oh, wow.
As a result of those wind farms.
Right.
They're self-defeating. Like you said, a snapshot in time is how they measure what they do. People say, oh, we produce 12% of our energy here by wind. No, we don't. I'll bet we don't even produce 2%. But what they'll do is they'll go in a low energy, a low demand hour on a windy night, probably, because that's the lowest demand. They'll have the batteries fully charged next to the wind farm or the solar farm, and then shunt that power to the power grid and say, see, that's 11% of all the draw. For as long as those batteries were firing. When they go dead, that turbine has to start cranking up again. I don't think people talk about a direct feed. I don't think there's any place that has a viable or critical direct feed from any wind farm. Do you know of anything like that?
No, I'm not an engineer, but an economist. So I've limited awareness of the actual physics and engineering of some of these wind farms. Some of my colleagues know that better. But I believe you're right. For a start, they do direct current, right? They don't do alternate. So you have to have they do direct current. They don't do alternate. So
Well,
you have to.
if you run it right through the power into the grid, the power can be modulated and used.
Right.
But I can't think of a situation where they would rely on that.
No, absolutely not. Yeah. Yeah.
The subsidies that go to these people, like you said, my first rule of subsidies is every time a subsidy comes due, they demand more. We need more. Colleges, hospitals, wind farms, it doesn't matter. Sugar, if the government's giving them money and subsidizing their operation, when that subsidy period is over, they go to the government and say, oh no, we need more. It's got to be more. And people will only put up with that for so long because their energy expenses are going to go up and so are their taxes at that, that kind of rate. And I predicted that these windmills will be rusted, rotting hulks on the landscape in 25 years.
Yes, I've seen pictures of those windmill arms,
The blades.
the blades. Yes, that's right. And you see a graveyard of them just rotting away, and they can't be recycled without paying, a fortune for doing it. So they're just left to rot away. And of course, because both solar modules and those wind blades have got rare earth elements of various minerals, they can leach into the ground and actually present a real health hazard.
Yeah, the level of toxins in batteries and solar cells are mind-blowing. You think we have a problem? People say we have a problem with spent nuclear fuel, storing it. Try storing these batteries that come out of cars, that come out of wind farms, that can no longer be recycled, or the parts that can't be recycled. Where are they going to go? They're all reactive elements. They're all going to end up in the soil.
Yeah, very, very concerning.
Yeah, even if you put them in a barrel, I don't care what you do, that barrel will eventually give way.
Yes.
And I do have an answer to the Yucca Mountain nuclear storage, but I'll save that for another show. The ocean-based wind farms, they say, oh, they're going to be so far out, you'll barely see them. There is no way. With the investment we have to make in aluminum and copper, just getting them, they're not going to waste 18 miles of cable to get to one of those pinwheels. It's going to be the shortest distance they can possibly connect.
Right. Yes.
You'll be able to hear them when you're on the beach, much less see the giant arm going around when you're trying to get a suntan.
Yes. Wasn't there an incident where wind blade, one of the arms fell off, got broken, and ended up on the beach? That was in the U.S.
12 investigators are tracking the Vineyard Wind turbine blade break. The company confirms parts of the blade are now washing up on beaches in southeastern Massachusetts.
There have also been reports of debris in Rhode Island. Target 12 investigator Kate Wilkinson is live at Horseneck Beach in Westport, where some of that debris has been found.
Yeah, the affected beaches are in Westport, a couple of them. Thankfully, beaches open here today. And one of the things that local leaders are warning, though, is to be aware that if you do see any debris, that you need to report it right away.
I haven't seen that, but I will.
That news, I'll send a reference to you later, but that news was out about 2 to 3 months ago in one of the very high income areas on the beach in the Northwest, in the New England area, if I'm not mistaken. I'll send you the reference to that. That got the airwaves for quite some time. They couldn't hide that.
Yeah.
But like most of these
And
things,
that means they have fiberglass fibers floating around in the water.
absolutely.
Get
Yes.
that in your bathing suit and see how it feels.
Yes. Yes. Shocking.
But you're right. They will overstay their welcome. But if we don't stop it now, they will stay their welcome to the point where there'll be nobody to take down the old solar farms or take down the old windmills. Because those people went out of business and parachuted out years ago. Now you got this thing sitting here rotting into the ground. You got a quarter mile of concrete under it. Nobody's going to want to say, yeah, sure, I'll spend billions of dollars getting rid of 20 of these boogers, you know? It's not
Yes. Yeah. We are polluting the world. We're killing the birds, all in the name of saving the environment. The irony couldn't get thicker. The tragedy couldn't get worse. And the birds, and not just the birds, but the insects that are killed in a mass basis by the spinning arms of these windmills. It's a tragedy. And I moved to England 2 years ago, and I go for these drives. So I went a couple of times to Scotland, and it's just a pity, this beautiful rolling hillside, that has been there for eons, since history began. And now we just polluted the entire environment with these ugly industrialized landscapes.
Yeah.
But if there's an ideology, nothing can fight it. That's the thing about ideologies, that you get perverse outcomes, and there's little that people like you and me can do a lot. And there is a reaction. Look at the election of President Trump. I mean, people do at the end of the day rise up and say that, of course, he was elected for a range of things, but certainly his skepticism of this climate alarmist talk played a role in it. I mean, he was outspoken against wind right from the early days when he was running for his first term. He was in no uncertain terms critical of this climate alarm and calling it a scam openly. The first leader in the Western world to do so in such a direct and abrupt manner. And I think it's done wonders. I've written a couple of articles, or more than two, on the role of President Trump in taking away this momentum behind this climate juggernaut that has taken over the world over the last.
I saw that article that you reposted. That was a good article.
Right, thank you. But so there are signs of hope. And in Europe, of course, the populist parties that have come up, they've come up in response to various things, including the mass immigration, the continued war in Ukraine, without attempts to talk and have diplomatic solutions with Russia, but also the immense burden on people's welfare and people's cost of living imposed by this virtue signaling green policies that all the European governments have been pushing, mainly left of center or socialist governments. Now the populist parties have come back in power, and as you saw last week, they can't handle it. So they use lawfare against Marine Le Pen in France to stop her from gaining power. They're trying to do the same with the German AfD party, which is equally popular with the main leading party in Germany today. If truly open and free elections were run, these populist parties would come in and reject a lot of this.
Europe would be looking very Trumpy right now.
Yes.
If it wasn't for the lawfare. And they have nobody but Barack Obama to thank for that.
Absolutely.
It was during Biden's term that the use of law as a weapon came into fashion. But Biden wasn't running a thing. I call that Obama's third term.
Yes, a lot of people do.
Hussein, peace be upon him.
Yes.
This is the pattern that's been set. Now you got Romania, Hungary, Germany, France. It is England doing
Austria, Italy. Of course, we got Meloni, who is not very impressed by the green initiatives.
Yeah.
So yeah, she wants Italians make very good sports cars, and she doesn't want to lose that. So
Yeah.
she's pushed back against the EU as well.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
gonna be,
So
I think the prime mover in the government being that corrupt is money coming from green energy and from fossil fuels. The cronies are pulling their hair out and paying whatever they have to pay for their political hacks. I'll use that word.
mm,
And that's what we're seeing play out in Europe right now.
yes, yes, the lawfare against the conservative parties is shameless. I mean, Europe is a continent that can boast about creating democracy. You know, from
Right.
the classical Greece, UK. If you see the United Kingdom now and its approach to free speech, it is striking. It is just
It's
so.
heartbreaking.
It's heartbreaking. It's obscene. Housewives who may have written a tweet in the spur of the moment, getting imprisoned while vicious, violent thugs are being let off scot-free. So what's going on in England, and I live here, it is heartbreaking. It truly is.
I've commented a few times now about what must be going through the minds of an average police officer in England.
Please tell a friend about the Free Zone Communiqué. We live and die with the share and subscribe buttons. Please use affiliate and sponsor buttons to support our work. Thank you very much for joining us today.